1. The arrogance of the Sentari Empire. The Sentari Empire, once a collection of nomadic species spread across distant galaxies, had forged itself into one of the most feared civilizations in the universe. They had spent millennia perfecting their technology, subjugating weaker worlds, and expanding their reach into the farthest corners of space. From desert planets to icy moons, no environment had proven too hostile for their war machines. With each conquest, their empire grew, as did their sense of invincibility. Commander Vox, a seasoned veteran of countless campaigns, stood aboard the bridge of the Dominion, the Sentari flagship. His crimson eyes glowed with the satisfaction of another impending victory. Earth, a small, unremarkable blue and green sphere hanging in the void, was next. Its defenses were laughable: a few satellites, primitive aircraft, and outdated nuclear weapons. To Vox, this was not a war but a routine planetary acquisition. Humans, Vox sneered, as his holographic projector displayed images of Earth's inhabitants. They looked soft, weak, preoccupied with their own petty conflicts. In the Centauri's eyes, humanity had never faced a true existential threat and had grown complacent in their peaceful existence. Their technology, while advancing, was laughable when compared to the Centauri's hyper-advanced weaponry, energy shields, and teleportation tech. Earth had been studied for years before the invasion was launched. The Centauri's probes and surveillance had collected detailed data on the planet's geography, natural resources, and military capabilities. Vox and his officers concluded that Earth's land-based civilization posed no threat. A swift strike from orbit would overwhelm any resistance. One day Vox said confidently to his officers, his voice laced with arrogance, "That is all it will take to bring this planet under our rule." His officers nodded in agreement. After all, Earth was far less developed than the last planet they had conquered, Othrex, a world that had put up a worthy fight with its formidable defense systems and resilient species. But Earth's people were divided, and their technologies were primitive by comparison. On the bridge of the Dominion, Vox's second-in-command, General Kale, surveyed the star charts. "Commander, all systems are ready. Shall we commence the orbital assault?" Vox glanced at Earth, already imagining its cities crumbling beneath the Centauri's plasma cannons. He waved his hand dismissively, as though brushing aside the notion of any significant opposition. "Yes, but first, let us demonstrate our superiority. Send the first wave to subdue any remaining resistance on the surface." Dozens of warships broke from the fleet, descending through the atmosphere with their engines roaring like thunder. Vox watched with anticipation, imagining the devastation they would rain upon Earth's surface. However, as the ships descended into lower orbit, their scanners picked up something curious. Earth, though divided by continents, was dominated by massive expanses of water. The oceans, stretching far beyond their projections, seemed to pose some kind of anomaly in their readings. Vox frowned slightly. "Strange. I hadn't expected so much water." But no matter, send the first landing units to the major cities, he commanded, dismissing the oceans as a mere geographical inconvenience. After all, what threat could water pose to an empire that controlled the stars? In his arrogance, Vox assumed Earth's oceans were nothing more than an obstacle to be navigated, not realizing that. 2. The discovery of Earth's ocean. As the first wave of Sentari warships descended toward Earth, the ocean's vastness became increasingly difficult to ignore. The shimmering blue waters stretched across the globe, covering nearly 3/4 of the planet's surface. From high above, the oceans looked deceptively calm, almost peaceful. But beneath the surface, they concealed secrets that the Sentari had no way of understanding. From their command ship, the Sentari generals and analysts monitored the data streams pouring in from the descending fleet. Detailed scans of Earth's topography were already loaded into their systems, but something about the oceans caused slight anomalies in their readings. The waters seemed to distort the scanners, reflecting and refracting their signals in ways that were not normal. Still, the Sentari commanders, in their arrogance, brushed it off as a trivial concern. "These oceans are nothing," General Kale muttered. glancing at the holographic projections. A backwater planet like this may have some impressive bodies of water, but they are no match for the might of the Sentari. He wasn't alone in his confidence. The Sentari's ships had navigated through cosmic storms and the extreme gravitational pulls of dying stars. They had survived on desert planets where the surface temperatures could melt metal, and on frozen worlds where the air itself was too cold to breathe. A few oceans on Earth seemed laughable in comparison. Commander Vox agreed. We will establish forward bases on land. The oceans, while extensive, are irrelevant. They are just a barrier we must cross to complete our conquest. Yet, as the Sentari ships began to hover closer to Earth's surface, strange things began happening. The first hint that something was amiss came when one of the scout ships entered the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean. The pilot reported unusual interference, not from human forces, but from the ocean itself. The ship's communications became garbled, its scanners distorted by some kind of energy field they couldn't pinpoint. Captain, the pilot's voice crackled through the comms. We're experiencing some kind of electromagnetic disturbance. Sensors aren't working properly, and there's an intense pressure building up the closer we get to the surface. Commander Vox, watching from the command deck, scowled. Have the ship continue its descent. We must understand the source of this interference. The ship pushed further into the atmosphere, but the moment it dipped below the cloud cover and got close to the ocean's surface, its readings went haywire. A swirling vortex of energy seemed to rise from the water, enveloping the craft. The pilot struggled to maintain control, but the Sentari ship was built for space and atmospheric combat, not the mysterious forces of the deep. Without warning, the ship plunged into the water, its systems completely fried. The last thing the Sentari commanders saw on their monitors was the craft being pulled under by an unseen force, disappearing into the depths. The room fell silent. Commander Vox narrowed his eyes at the image of the planet's oceans on the screen. What is this? He growled. What is in those waters? I can't explain it, Sir General Kale replied, his voice more uncertain than usual. It appears to be some sort of natural phenomenon, perhaps. Tectonic activity, magnetic anomalies. Natural or not, Vox interrupted. This is an obstacle we must overcome. Deploy more ships. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. As more Sentari vessels descended, they began encountering the same problems. The closer they got to 3. The ocean strikes back. The Sentari fleet was now fully engaged in its exploration of Earth's oceans, determined to understand the anomalies they had encountered. Commander Vox's orders were clear more ships would be deployed to penetrate the watery depths, and any threats lurking beneath the surface were to be neutralized. The Sentari were not used to resistance, let alone from a natural element. They believed that any challenge could be overcome with enough firepower and technology. But as the ships descended into the vast waters of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans, they began to learn a harsh truth. Earth's oceans were no passive body of water, they were a battleground unlike any the Sentari had ever faced. The first real strike came without warning. A Sentari destroyer, bristling with weapons and shields, descended into the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the planet's ocean. As it descended, the crew marveled at the strange, alien life forms that populated the pitch-black waters. Giant squid-like creatures passed by, their bodies glowing with bioluminescence. Schools of glowing fish flitted past the ship's hull. The Sentari watched them with cold indifference. These life forms were primitive, nothing more than curiosities. But deep within the trench, something far larger stirred. Without warning, the ship's sensors went dark. The crew scrambled as the destroyer was suddenly gripped by an unseen force. Warning lights blared across the control panels as something enormous latched onto the vessel. The hull groaned under the pressure, and outside, tendrils as thick as trees coiled around the ship. It was a colossal squid, larger than any the Sentari had ever encountered on their scans. Its eyes, glowing faintly in the abyssal dark, locked onto the ship with an almost predatory intelligence. "Fire weapons," the captain shouted, his voice frantic. But the ship's plasma cannons were useless in the crushing depths. The immense pressure of the ocean dulled the power of their weapons, and the energy beams dissipated before they could strike their target. The squid's grip tightened, and with a violent jerk, the ship's hull cracked. The Sentari crew inside screamed as water flooded the interior. Within minutes, the destroyer was torn apart, vanishing into the black waters of the trench. No signal was ever received from the crew again. On the surface, Commander Vox's frustration mounted as more and more ships reported strange incidents. One by one, ships exploring deeper waters either went silent or sent back garbled distress signals. Many reported sightings of massive sea creatures the Sentari had no record of, creatures that should not exist according to their understanding of Earth's biology. In the Pacific, a Sentari battleship had just submerged off the coast of Japan when a series of sonar readings picked up a massive object moving toward them at incredible speed. The captain barely had time to react before a massive whale-like creature, a leviathan of the deep, slammed into the ship's side. The impact sent the ship careening through the water, its hull cracking under the force. The creature, an immense sperm whale, was followed by others killer whales, dolphins, and sharks, all seemingly working together in a strange, coordinated attack. The ship's crew was stunned. They had never seen animals act in such unison. It was as though the ocean's creatures were rallying against the invaders, as if they had become an extension of the ocean's will. "We're under attack," the ship's captain shouted, but it was too late. The ship was dragged down into the depths by the sheer weight and force of the attacking creatures. The crew, helpless in the face of such primal power, could do nothing but watch as their vessel was swallowed by the sea. Elsewhere, strange and violent weather patterns began to emerge over the oceans. Massive whirlpools formed seemingly out of nowhere, pulling Sentari ships into the dark, spinning them with such force that their hulls were torn apart. Tsunamis, generated by mysterious underwater disturbances, crashed into the invading fleet, flipping even the largest of ships like toys. The Sentari, who had conquered worlds and defied the forces of nature, were now at the mercy of Earth's oceans. Underwater volcanoes erupted with unnatural precision, spewing lava and ash that engulfed entire Sentari squadrons. The deeper the Sentari fleet ventured, the more hostile the environment became. Currents shifted unpredictably, creating powerful undertows that dragged ships to their doom. The ship's advanced thrusters struggled to keep them stable in the face of such elemental chaos. And then there were the strange magnetic anomalies that played havoc with the Sentari's technology. Energy shields flickered and died, targeting systems went offline, and even the most basic communication between ships became impossible. The oceans were disrupting everything from their weapons systems to their navigation. What had begun as a simple reconnaissance mission was rapidly becoming a fight for survival. Reports flooded into the dominion of creatures the Sentari had never seen before: giant eels that discharged electricity powerful enough to short out a ship's systems, schools of jellyfish whose stingers delivered shocks that could disable entire engines, and monstrous forms lurking in the deepest parts of the ocean, rising only to strike at the Sentari invaders before retreating into the black abyss. The most terrifying encounter came when a Sentari warship, scanning the depths off the coast of South America, detected a massive heat signature rising from the ocean floor. At first, they thought it was a malfunction. But as the signature drew closer, the ship's crew realized they were dealing with something entirely unknown. The water around the ship began to boil as the massive form rose from the deep, a creature of unimaginable size, its body glowing with molten heat. The warship's sensors barely had time to register the threat before it was engulfed in a wave of superheated water, the ship's hull melting as the creature passed by. The crew never stood a chance. The Sentari commanders could hardly believe the reports they were receiving. How could this be happening? They had faced planetary storms, cosmic radiation, and black hole anomalies, but nothing like this. The oceans of Earth were more than just a geographical feature. They were alive, and they were fighting back. The Sentari, accustomed to relying on their superior technology and firepower, found themselves helpless. Earth's oceans were not something they could dominate with a force beyond understanding. The Sentari, one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, found themselves facing a force they had never anticipated, a power far older, far more mysterious than their technology could comprehend. As more ships were lost to the depths, panic began to spread among the fleet. Commander Vox's once confident, imposing presence had become more rigid and strained as the situation grew worse with every passing hour. Reports of disappearing ships, electrical failures, and sea creatures of unimaginable size continued to pour in, but none of it made sense to the Sentari commanders. The oceans seemed to defy all logic, reacting to their every move as if the waters themselves were alive, as if some ancient intelligence was guiding the waves. From the command center aboard the Dominion, Vox glared at the holographic map of Earth's oceans, now glowing with data points marking the locations of lost ships. The dots formed a scattered constellation of defeat. Hundreds of ships had disappeared beneath the waves, vessels with impenetrable shields and advanced weaponry, all swallowed by the sea without a trace. Yet, it wasn't just the losses that haunted Vox, it was the eerie lack of explanation. "We've lost another 3 ships in the Atlantic," General Kale reported grimly. They were stationed near what the humans called the Bermuda Triangle. "We received a garbled distress call before they vanished. Something massive appeared on their radar just before the signal went dark." "Bermuda Triangle," Vox scoffed, though unease flickered in his crimson eyes. "Do you mean to tell me these primitive humans have legends of these waters? Is that supposed to frighten us?" "It's not just a legend," Kale continued, his voice dropping to a cautious tone. "The electromagnetic disturbances there are unlike anything we've encountered. The gravitational anomalies are also increasing in intensity. It's as if the entire ocean in that region is shifting. Our technology isn't just failing, it's being manipulated, controlled." Vox's fists clenched at his sides. The thought of being outwitted by a natural force, something as simple as water, was an affront to everything the Sentari stood for. He had seen galaxies burn, planets crumble under the weight of the Sentari Empire's might. And now, here they were, undone by an ocean on a backwater planet. He paced the command deck, his boots clanging against the metal floor. But his mind was racing. They had underestimated this planet from the start. Earth was not like the barren worlds they had conquered, where resources were easily plundered and resistance was minimal. Earth's oceans were unpredictable, volatile, and worse, they seemed sentient. Another officer, her voice trembling slightly, spoke up. "Sir, we've detected strange energy readings from the ocean floor. Our deep-sea probes have encountered resistance, an impenetrable barrier that seems to stretch beneath the seabed. It's almost as if something is down there, something alive." Vox stopped in his tracks, turning to face her. "Alive," he repeated, his voice incredulous. "Are you suggesting the ocean itself is some kind of living organism?" "We don't know for sure," the officer replied, "but the energy readings, they're not natural. It's as if something is harnessing the ocean's power, something far below the surface. And it's not just localized to one area. These readings are appearing in every major ocean across the planet, under the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Arctic oceans. It's like there's a network beneath the water." General Kale stepped forward, his expression grim. "Commander, we've never encountered anything like this. The electromagnetic fields, the gravitational shifts, the coordinated attacks from marine life, it's all connected. It's as if the ocean is protecting itself." "Protecting itself from us," Vox snapped, the frustration and disbelief finally bubbling over. "We are the Sentari. We have conquered worlds and systems that these humans can't even dream of. We bend the laws of physics with our technology. How can water stand against us?" But deep down, Vox knew that this was no ordinary force of nature. Something about these oceans defied their understanding. There was a pattern to the chaos, a method to the madness. The ocean wasn't just a body of water, it was a living force, a primordial entity that had existed long before the Sentari even knew of Earth's existence. And it wasn't just the creatures of the sea sharks, whales, and colossal squid that were fighting back. It was the water itself. On the bridge, the lights flickered as the Dominion's systems began to experience interference, even from high orbit. The ship trembled slightly, as if caught in a gravitational pull it couldn't escape. Vox and Kale exchanged uneasy glances. Something was reaching out, pulling at the ship. The ocean below seemed to ripple, even from space, as though beckoning them to come closer, to sink into its depths. Vox's eyes narrowed, his pride warring with the instinct to retreat. "What are we dealing with, Kale?" he asked, his voice low, almost a growl. "Some ancient weapon? Some kind of lost technology buried beneath the oceans?" Kale shook his head slowly. "No, Commander. I don't think it's technology at all. Whatever this is, it's alive. The oceans are alive. And they've existed far longer than we have. We may be facing something primordial." Vox stared at the projection, watching the swirling mass of water that represented Earth's oceans. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Could it be that the Sentari had finally encountered something beyond their control? A force that defied all their understanding of the universe. Something so ancient and powerful that even their advanced technology couldn't stand against it. Commander and officers shouted, interrupting his thoughts. "The fleet were losing ships faster now. The anomalies are spreading. It's as if the oceans are responding to our presence, growing stronger with every moment we remain here." Vox's jaw tightened. He had never encountered an enemy like this, an enemy that couldn't be seen, couldn't be fought with traditional weapons. The ocean wasn't just a battlefield, it was the enemy itself, and it was fighting back in ways the Sentari had never imagined. Even the mighty Sentari fleet, with all its power, was being outmaneuvered by a force that they had underestimated from the start. The oceans were ancient, unfathomable, and deeply connected to something that existed long before the Sentari came to Earth. As the water's power grew, it became clear that this wasn't just about the surface. Something far deeper, far more mysterious, was stirring beneath the waves. The Sentari had always believed they were the most powerful force in the galaxy. But now, as the waters of Earth continued to rise against them, in this story, an advanced alien race known as the Sentari invades Earth with the intent to conquer the planet. Confident in their superiority, they overlook the vast oceans, initially viewing them as a mere obstacle. However, as their ships begin to explore Earth's waters, they encounter bizarre phenomena. The oceans disrupt their technology with electromagnetic anomalies, gravitational disturbances, and chaotic currents. As Sentari ships descend into the depths, they are attacked by colossal sea creatures, squid, whales, and other mysterious life forms. These creatures seem coordinated, working together to defend the oceans. The deeper the Sentari probe, the more violent the ocean becomes, with whirlpools, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions threatening their fleet. They soon realize that the oceans aren't just a natural feature, but a living, sentient force that is actively fighting against them. The story builds tension as the Sentari begin to understand that Earth's oceans are not something they can control with brute force. The waters are ancient, intelligent, and possess a power beyond their comprehension. The Sentari fleet suffers heavy losses, and even their most advanced technology